All right, welcome back to Faithful Athlete, Episode 3. We have a special guest today, Erik Trent. Erik, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Why don't you give the people some background on who you are and a little bit about you?
Awesome. So, my name is Erik Trent. I graduated from Bret Harte two years ago now. I'm going to be a sophomore in college. I'm going to Vanguard University down in Costa Mesa, Southern California. And I've been growing up playing sports my whole life. So,
Awesome. So when you were in high school, when you were in college, kind of some icebreaker questions for us, if you don't mind. Your pregame meal, what was that like? What was your pregame meal? In fact, what was your pregame ritual like?
okay, so I'm going to start off with the meal part. I'm going to take it back to high school. Senior year of high school, we'd always do barbecues or dinners at Barnett's house. And I just remember the meal that I always performed the best on. And to this day, I'm just like, I need that meal. It was always spaghetti, garlic bread, and Caesar salad. Heather Barnett made some bomb garlic bread, spaghetti, and Caesar salad. So after that, I was like, I need that every game. And that was the go-to for me.
I agree. Spaghetti is pretty awesome. What about your pregame ritual? What did that look like in high school?
I didn't really have one. I never really was that kind of person that thought, okay, I need to do this every game to get results. Kind of just went through it and took every day as it came. So,
yeah, awesome. How did you manage sports and how did you manage school at the same time, especially in high school, and then more importantly too, college? How did you do that? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I've always been a motivated student as well as an athlete. The classroom, my parents always emphasized from a young age that school's most important. School's going to get you places. If you're not going to be able to play sports anywhere outside of high school or in high school if you can't get the grades. So I always made it a priority to get school done first, and then sports always came second. So in that sense, I was both motivated in school and on the field. So when it kind of came down to it, I got what I needed to done in the classroom so that I could play on the field. But it just came down to not procrastinating. I know that's a popular thing with a lot of kids. It was with me too, and I still procrastinate. But you gotta, if you want to truly play on the field, you have to get done in the classroom first. So I made that a priority in my everyday kind of high school and college day.
Yeah. So what's a key takeaway from you that would help that you could give the kids at Bret Harte? If you could tell the incoming freshmen, the sophomores, those younger kids who maybe haven't figured that out yet, what's a key to making it done? How do you not procrastinate? What do you do besides just saying, oh, don't procrastinate? What does that look like practically for them?
What I would always do is anytime I had free time in another class, which I had a lot of it, which is kind of funny, but any free time I had, I'd always make sure I got it done in the moment. I would tell myself, okay, I want to go hang out with friends later. I want to go practice later. I'm going to get this done now so I don't have to worry about it later. And it's just always kind of been a part of me that wanted to get things done so that I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't like to put it off. It happened a lot, but I didn't like to put it off. It always kind of stuck in the back of my mind like, oh, I got to go do this now. But when I got it done sooner and earlier, it always felt better. And it was able to take that off my plate and not have to worry about it for later. So the biggest advice I would give somebody was to just get it done right when it's assigned. Anytime you have free time, don't mess around, get it done, and you'll thank yourself later on.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important as far as like a life skill goes too, because I can't tell you how many times in life it's like, hey, I had this thing comes up, I need to remember to do this, and I just don't. Right? I put it in I go to put it in my notes, and I forget to put it in my notes, and then all of a sudden that due date, somebody goes, hey, do you have that thing? And I go, no, I don't have that thing, and so I think at least, putting it in your to-do list or on your writing it down, putting it somewhere practically, hey, I need to get this done ASAP or by this time. I think that's great advice, and I think that'd be really helpful to the kids because that's a huge life skill. Would you say that taking care of your schoolwork made you a better athlete, or it prepared you better for athletics?
I would say absolutely. It starts in the classroom, like I said. It's about the discipline. getting things done when it needs to get done, it translates onto the field as well. I've always had that drive in the classroom, and that's kind of translated into the field. It's like, okay, now I got a job to do here. I'm going to get my job done to the best of my ability when I need to get it done, and not slack off and be lazy on the field, because when you're lazy in the classroom, it'll translate, whether you think it does or not, onto the field. So I've always made it a priority to get it done what needs to get done, and not put it off and be lazy about it.
How much harder was it when you got into college to not procrastinate? Was it easier to not procrastinate? Was it harder? What was that like? What was the transition as far as managing sports and school like for you going into college?
I would say it was easier not to procrastinate in college, because I started to take classes that was kind of pertaining to my career. So I was a lot more engaged in a sense. I was more passionate about the subject that I was kind of learning about. So it was easier to get it done because I wanted to get it done, because I was interested in the matter. So it was a really big transition from high school to college, in the sense that I kind of matured in a sense. I knew that whatever I did, it was going to better. I'm better preparing myself for what's to come later on. And for example, reading. I used to hate reading. As a kid, my parents would tell me to read. I think that's why I didn't read, is because my parents were always nagging me to read. So of course, you're not going to read. But in college, I really started to read books and really learn a lot. And that came from part of the maturity, is that you're on your own. Mm-hmm. You have a life ahead of you, and it's going to hit you before you know it, that you got to start taking things seriously. So when it came down to that, I procrastinated a lot less in college, because it kind of was the real world kind of set in. So
yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes of all time that I've ever heard is that leaders are readers. And that's kind of, because I was the same way. Like, I like the idea of reading. I like the idea of being a reader, but I have to work really hard to do it. Like, it doesn't come natural to me. I'm a slow reader as well. So then I get frustrated, and then I start thinking, and I'm not paying attention. And then I'm like, what did I just read? And it's a whole mess. So I have to really sit down and focus and work hard. But one way I got around that is I use Audible and use audiobooks. And that really helps me, because I can listen to what I'm reading. And I got in a debate with this with one of my friends. I was like, they're like, you're not reading the book. And I'm like, I am. I'm consuming the knowledge. Like, you're not reading it though. You can't mark it as read. And I was like, well, there's not an option to mark it as listen, so I'm going to mark it as read. Yep. But yeah, I think reading is a huge key. So going off that, I want to know again both, but specifically in high school, what was your favorite moment at Bret Harte? What's the moment that sticks out to you the most in sports? And then we'll do two parts, in sports and then in just regular high school life.
Yeah, these might tie in together a little bit regarding sports, but something that I really look back on and miss from the high school atmosphere is like the Friday night lights, the football games, going to the volleyball games, the basketball games, after school with your buddies, hanging out after school, going to the games. That's kind of like the atmosphere I really missed this year being in college. It wasn't quite the same. So that's something that I really enjoyed doing here. And I'd say those are the high points. Just the Friday night lights, just going to sporting events with your friends, and seeing other families there that you haven't seen in a long time. Just kind of that whole atmosphere and vibe from that I really enjoyed. Those are the high points for me. A straight sport-wise, always the Calaveras Bret Harte games. Yeah. Either homecoming or, it fell on I think our homecoming this last year or a couple years ago. But Calaveras games were always, the crowd was there. It was always a different kind of atmosphere that was special. Academically, school-wise, the high points for me, probably, this is kind of going to sound bad, but this last year, 2 years ago, senior year, I got out at 11:15 on Wednesday and Fridays. So I got to go home, and it felt like that college. It was kind of like the first step in a college schedule. You get done early, and then I had the rest of the day to either go hit or get my homework done, especially, or have that time to hang out with family. So that was definitely a high point academically this year.
Nice. That's cool. Well, what was it like? So you obviously graduated 2 years ago from Bret Harte, and then you played one. You went to, where did you go to again?
Arizona Christian
Arizona
University.
Christian, right. So you were there, now you're transferring to Vanguard. What was that transition for sports like, transitioning from high school baseball to college baseball? Division 3?
NAIA Division
NAIA.
1.
Nice.
Smaller
Okay.
division.
Yeah. So what was it like transferring from, small town Bret Harte to that NAIA atmosphere?
It was really a wake-up call. Like, I've always been a good athlete around here, but when you get into where everybody is a good athlete, they're all the best of the best from their high schools, the best from their areas. You get there and you're like, wow, like all these guys are just as good as me. Like, I actually have to earn my spot here. I can't just walk in expecting to get a starting position or make the big team. It was a wake-up call for sure. I would see the guys around me. It kind of made me regret kind of not putting in more work than I did. You see the guys that didn't have the natural talent, but you can see how much work they put in, and that got them a step further than all the guys who had the talent and decided to kind of slack off a bit. So there's some grown dudes out there. I think it's a common misconception that D1 athletes are superior to everybody else, that none of the other divisions are quite the same competition. But when I was there, I even kind of thought that. Like when I was going NAIA, I was like, oh, there's going to be good athletes, but D1 is where all the best athletes go. We played a lot of D1 athletes, bounce backs, JUCO colleges that we played that had some very high potential. Like you'll see them in the Division I programs this next couple of years, that you just don't understand how good these guys are. And that's something I always try to tell my brother is, hey, if you want to make it, I've seen firsthand how good some of these dudes are. Yeah. That you really got to put in the work because you got to have something that they don't to be able to stand out. So, yeah.
Now, how big? What was the size of the team? Because I think you've mentioned it before, but those baseball teams are pretty big, right? I mean, how
huge,
big?
Huge. So at Arizona we had 3 teams.
Oh wow!
So the first day of fall there was over 100 guys that showed up.
Jeez.
And
how many kids at Bret Harte day one for baseball that show up that you have to compete with? I should say
15, 20.
Wow.
Yeah, it was definitely a big change. That, like I said, now you got to really fight for a spot because you have 100 other dudes that are just as talented as you are. So, like I said, you got to have something that they don't. You got to stand out in a way.
Yeah. So, if you could encourage any of the athletes that kind of are up and coming at Bret Harte that are potentially in the next, they still have some time. Those freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and even the seniors have a little bit of time. But what would be a key that you could give them? Hey, like if you want to make it, you talked about your brother. Like what would you tell your brother right now? Hey, if you want to make it, like this is what you should be doing for general sports, not necessarily specific to baseball, but what would you be encouraging them to do?
Yeah, so it comes down to if you want it, how bad do you want it? If you don't really want to play, you just kind of want to be like, oh yeah, I'll play college ball. Like I just want to keep playing baseball. I mean, you can find a place. There's hundreds of thousands of colleges out there. You can find a place to go play at. But if you want to compete at that level, you have to be putting in so much time and effort. Like it comes down to every rep matters. Every shot you shoot, it matters. You can't just go through the motions and expect to get farther on in your career. It just doesn't happen. And that's something that I kind of didn't really realize until this year is all these dudes, they didn't go through the motions. They put every 100% effort into every ground ball, every shot, every hit, everything. And that's super crucial for getting on and exceeding at the next level is you got to really want it. You got to be passionate about it. Otherwise, I mean, it might not end well for you if you don't do that.
How long were practices? Like what did that look like? What was like a day in the life of athletics for you from morning wake up to, laying your head on the pillow and going to sleep?
Yep. So in the morning, I'd usually wake up between 7 and 8, depending on my classes. I would go to my first class, go to my second class, and around noon we'd have our workouts with our assigned groups. Probably
What's
about
an assigned group?
There's about 20 guys in each group. So
Specific to baseball team?
Specific to baseball.
Okay.
So we at Arizona had a specific gym for all the athletes. So no random Joe could walk in there. All athletes. And we had the trainers that are very well known actually. They train pro players. They have a huge corporation down in Texas, but we'd go in there around noontime, have about an hour workout, just getting after it. Like these were some next level workouts.
Was it just like weights? Was it plyometrics? Was it a lot of, tailored to you, or more tailored to the group of 20?
At first it was more kind of group.
Yeah.
A lot of full body workouts.
Okay.
Like
each day was a full body?
Yes.
You'd hit every body part?
Absolutely. For the most part, yeah. I've grown up going to the gym, and I'd walk in there and be like, okay, I'm going to hit bis and tris today. Or I'm going to hit back and bi. And I walked in, I was like, okay, what are we hitting today? Like, I'm excited for this. And they're like, we're going to do legs and arms and going to hit lower back and all these different things. And I'm just like, okay. I walked out of there that first day, and my whole body was hurting, man. I went.
What was that workout? What was the workout first day? So if these kids want to prepare, they can go do this workout.
We had some front squats, which I've never really done before.
Yeah.
And those, if you haven't done them,
killer.
they really kill the front of the shoulders.
They probably don't let you wear those pads, do they?
No.
Yeah, I don't let the basketball boys wear the pads either. They're for sissies.
Okay, that's fair. But yeah, we did a lot of those. We did some sprints.
Yeah.
Even our warm up, like you kind of mentioned plyometrics. Like there was some plyometrics involved in our warm up.
Okay.
And those even got your sweat moving and heart racing, which it's supposed to, which is good.
Warm ups are so important.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, so back to the first day of fall. After the workouts, we would go. I had one more class after workouts that ended about 2:15.
Okay.
And then practices. They didn't want us to get there before 3 because we practiced at a high school. Our field is still being built. So we had to drive 10-15 minutes down the road to a high school, nice high school. Yeah. But we had to drive there, and they were all getting out of school at 3. So if we were to show up at 3,
that was probably so cool for the high schools that were around.
You definitely
They'd probably love that.
Yeah, they would. There was just one day where one of our teammates had a Tesla, a white Tesla, and if you don't know, like the Teslas, you can hit a button on the remote, and they start doing like this party, like doors start going up and down.
Oh, that's funny.
It plays music, and one dude. He had a group of kids surround him, and they're like, "Cool car, man!" And he's like, "Yeah, you want to see something cooler?" And he played like this party thing, and they're all like celebrating, and they thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And then they walked by, and my windows were down, and I had this old Toyota Highlander at the time, and they're like, "Can your car do that too?" And I'm like, "No, man, but I'll show you something it can do. It can drive from here to there." Yeah. But yeah, so those practices, we'd show up there, and the first part of the fall, it was 1:15 every day. Jeez. Absolutely cooking out there. And there were 4.5 hour practices.
4.5 hours?
4.5 hours.
From 3 to 7?
We'd be there till 7 and get home about 8.
And you'd already been in the gym for what, 2 hours?
Hour and a half. Yep.
So that's what, 5.5 hours, 6 hours? Let's say 6.
Yeah, it was a grind.
4.5. What do you do in baseball for 4.5 hours?
Exactly.
How long does a game even last? A game does not last 4.5 hours.
Not now with all the pitch timers and everything. Absolutely not.
What did a practice look like for you guys though? Like, was it a lot of individual stuff, team stuff? I mean, you had 150 guys out there.
So that was one of the big reasons it took so long, is like everybody had to get their reps. The warm up took a little while. Then we did all of our sprint speed work. Our coach liked to call it speed work and not like a punishment in a sense. He's like, this is for you. That you need this. This is good for you. You'll thank us for this.
That's a big coaching thing that a lot of books I've been reading lately, they've been talking about how, it's reframing sprinting, and it's not punishment, but as conditioning. This is what we're going to do to get better. Yep. So that's cool to hear that. Kind of reaffirms what I've been thinking in my own head. Yeah. So that's cool.
Exactly, yeah.
4.5 hours, man. So how long is like a practice at Bret Harte? The longest one?
The longest one was probably 3.
Okay.
And for me in high school, the practices that were 3 hours, like it went by so fast.
Yeah.
Because I was out there enjoying it and had all my buddies out there. But
right.
In college, like 150 dudes that you don't really know.
And you're having to fight for
And you're fighting for everything.
Jeez.
It is,
and it's 115 degrees outside.
Exactly. And they didn't have water fountains outside.
Oh,
So the water you brought is all you had.
Oh my gosh.
And by the time you got to the field, it wasn't cold anymore.
Yeah. Did you ever just bring one little like 16-ounce water bottle?
First day,
Oh
I had
no.
my little 24-ounce hydro flask.
Oh goodness.
And I ran out in probably the first hour of practice.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, does anybody have extra water? Like, I'm going to die
heck
out here.
no. They're like, you didn't come prepared.
Exactly. I had the most raging headache after that.
I bet.
It was miserable. I think probably my third day of fall ball after the workout, I was just sitting on the ground. I'm not a guy that will sit down when everybody else is standing talking. I just could, I felt so sick. I was on the ground just like laying back, like under a fan, trying to cool off. And as soon as that thing ended, I didn't run, but I got back to my room, all sweat and everything. I would never do this, and I just laid down on the floor, and I was like, please, I need to start feeling better, because then I had to get up and get ready to go to practice. So I got into the shower after I felt somewhat decent to even stand up.
Yeah.
And just took a cold shower, but I was miserable that whole day.
Then you went to Big Five and bought a 50-ounce hydro flask.
I stole my roommate's actually.
There you go.
Yeah.
Even better.
Yeah.
Stealing.
Yeah.
Don't do that, kids. Just kidding. So it sounds like that. I mean, that's the when you look at the lives of like successful people, you know, one of the biggest, I feel like, misconceptions is that, you know, and there are some people who are just handed success, but most successful people don't accidentally stumble upon success, right? It happens by hard work, and it happens by preparation. And so what it sounds like is that if you're not prepared for it, then it's not going to be a fun time for you. And
Absolutely.
you better learn quickly how to become prepared.
Definitely. Like the practices and workouts that we done, like I said, I never did anything close to that kind of level.
Yeah.
And that first day, it hit me, and it was like, okay, this is what it's about. This is what the level I got to get up to in order to succeed and match with these other guys. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you ended up on what team? So there's three teams?
On the JV team.
Nice.
So we played a lot of the junior colleges around.
So you still got to play though, even though you
still got to play. Very good
That's
competition. Cool. Arizona junior college ball is no joke. Like I was saying earlier, like a lot of them are going to be future D1 players.
Yeah.
And there was some legit dudes out there that even blew my mind away.
Well, a lot of them too. Like a lot of sometimes kids just don't have the grades, or they don't have, you know, the academics required to attend one of those big scholarship schools. So you have these really, really talented athletes that are like, I'm gonna go, or, you know, they want to save money.
Yep.
You know, because it's expensive, and so they go to a junior college, dominate there, get looked at, and then now people know who they're at, and they're like, okay, that kid can play. Here's a scholarship to this bigger school.
A lot of the bigger schools now that I've been kind of realizing and hearing from people is a lot of the big D1 schools, they're looking for those transfers, dudes that have been through the low of the low, getting that JUCO ball, because it's a completely different atmosphere and vibe from a university. They scrap around and drive themselves to games, depending on where you are, of course, but they go through it. Every day is a grind for them as well, and they've had those 2 years to kind of mature and get bigger. So that a lot of D1 programs, they look for those junior college players, and that's something that I didn't realize until this last year. I was always, when I was going through my recruiting process, for me it was always, I want to go to a 4-year university. Why would I want to waste my time in a junior college? But I've seen so many successful people in the D1 programs now that came from junior colleges. That's something that I tell I have cousins that are in the recruiting process right now. And it was same with my brother. I'm telling him, don't count out the junior colleges. Like, that is a really legit way to go if you want to continue your baseball career.
Yeah. Even Jay Clifton, really, really good athlete from Calaveras. He went to Columbia. Yep. Really, really smart, because they're one of the highest ranked junior colleges in our area. They're top of their league. They compete.
They're legit.
You know, and he's going to get a lot better there. Yep. You know, they've got great facilities. So, you know, it's definitely a viable option, and expense-wise, it's so much cheaper.
Absolutely. Especially in California, they have the Promise Grant, too, where you can go for free almost. So, definitely a good option if you're wanting to have an extra year to kind of even figure out if you still want to play baseball or your sport, rather than committing to a 4-year university where you might just want to go to the university to play a sport, and then you end up not playing the sport after your first year, and it's like, okay, now I got to change my plans and everything. So definitely don't count that out if you're looking to play college sports.
So the season came and went for you, and you transitioned out of college sports, actually. So I would like to dive a little bit into that, because this is a faith-based, faithful athlete. Tell me what kind of motivated you to make that decision that didn't, a lot of people would look at that and go, why? Like, as a freshman in college, you made the JV team, not the third team. Was that freshman team? Is that what they call it?
It was a club team, so it was all the upperclassmen that didn't really see going anywhere,
Gotcha.
And then the freshmen that couldn't make the JV team.
Yeah. So, like, you were just getting started. Like, there's no reason really that you couldn't have continued to climb the ranks and compete at a high level at your college, or any other college for that matter. So what happened? Like, that almost sounds like I'm saying that in a bad way. I'm not saying that in a bad way. As what changed your mind? What changed your mind?
Yeah, so when it comes down to it, God put it on my heart that growing up, sports were my everything. I idolized sports in a sense. That's who I identified myself. People knew my name because of sports. And when I started to really grow in my faith, I realized, like, hey, I can't have idols. I don't want to idolize other things that aren't God. It became too much where I was like, I need to make a change here, because I don't want to be known as the athlete that did everything he could to be an athlete. It's just something that God put on my heart that's like, I got to check myself and realize at the end of the day, this athletics aren't everything. And after going to the Christian university and having the blessing of my roommates that I got assigned, they really helped me grow in my faith. And I started to, the closer I got to God, the more my kind of passion and my motivation kind of changed from, I want to be that successful athlete, to I want to be the best man of God I can be. And that kind of changed my heart posture in a sense as I got closer to God. It made me want different things and let go of other things. And that's kind of what happened with my sports, is like, I want to pursue my relationship with God more than I want to continue my sports. And at the end of the day, I chose to not play, and I'm going to use the extra time to spread the gospel to other kids. Going to start Bible studies, going to start these things that I wish I had when I was that age. So
what was the moment that you realized? Because we talked a little bit a while back, and I know you started going to a small group, right, with some of your roommates to a little Bible study. But what was the moment where you just kind of felt was that tipping point, I guess, if you will, or that moment where you really felt the Lord kind of point you, say, hey, like, sports is great. You can do a lot for me in sports, and what I want to make clear to our listeners and these kids is what we're not encouraging them to do is just to go quit their sports.
No.
Sports are great. Absolutely. But for you, like, this was your calling. Like, this isn't somebody else's calling. This was Erik's calling. Yeah. So what kind of led you? What did you hear? Did you have an experience? Did you have a moment? Did you just kind of slowly start to feel this way and feel like the Lord was pulling you in that direction? Did you have a moment where you felt like, man, I feel like the Lord is calling me right now to go do this thing, to go fulfill a different mission?
Yes. There was a few moments, actually. Back to the roommate, he was a very successful high school basketball player. He was going to go on to play college. But he ended up not playing his senior year of high school because he had an internship to be a pastor, a youth pastor. And he chose to go that route, the pastor route. And after hearing that story, I was just kind of like, huh, like, that's someone I want to be, a guy chasing after God and not these other things, which, like you said, isn't bad at all. It was my calling to leave those things. And it was something where I don't want to keep pursuing something where my heart is not fully in it. I don't think that's fair to me or fair to the guys around, 150 other guys around me. that are battling for the spot, and they've wanted this their whole life. I wanted this whole life, but my passions changed. They were after God now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that you kind of nailed it there. Like, you felt like the Lord is calling you. Like, it wasn't, it's different. It's not like you just woke up one day and you're like, I'm done. This isn't really working out. I didn't make the varsity team. I'm gonna sulk and pout. I'm not gonna play baseball. It was more of like, like I feel like this is for me. I feel like this changes what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go out there. What else? Like, I remember there were some very key things that happened when I was in college that kind of led me to feel like the Lord was saying, hey, this is what I have for you. You're not ready yet. You're not there yet. It's not time for you to be in pastoral ministry yet, but that time will be coming soon, and this is where I want you to go. And there was a couple key moments that I remember, a couple key people that talked to me and kind of affirmed that and reaffirmed what I was already thinking. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so I kind of had a moment also. You were kind of talking about, I didn't just wake up and was like, hey, I'm not going to do this. It was more of a long process, a lot of prayer, I seeked a lot of guidance from fellow peers that have gone through similar relationships. What really kind of finalized it is I started attending this young adults group in Tempe, where the guy was a very successful athlete, gonna go D1. He might have even played a year of D1 sports, but he ended up getting in a car accident and was paralyzed from the waist down for years. And the sports that had become his everything, just like me, were taken away. And then what was left of him is he was broken. He had nowhere to go. He felt like he was at the end of the line, And he had a brother or a cousin or something that just kept nagging him to go to church with him. It was like, hey, there's a seat open if you want to attend with me. And one day he just decided.
I love that.
Yeah, he decided to go one day, and he said he showed up, and the pastor came up, and the first thing he said was "Welcome home," and that just kind of hit him, and he just broke down. And ever since then, he's been pursuing his faith, and that kind of inspired me that this athlete that had it all, he was doing it, he was super successful, and it got taken away, and he had to find something else. He had to, at the end of the day, his identity wasn't in sports, like I kind of touched on earlier. It was in Christ. And ever since I kind of heard his story, I was like, okay, maybe this is the route I'm supposed to go, because he turned into a pastor. He works with professional athletes as kind of like a counselor. Just a really, really all-around good guy that really inspired me. It's like, hey, I've been around sports my entire life. Maybe I can go into something sports ministry-wise. He did it. I can do that same thing. And it kind of just inspired me. And then to build off of that, I've always been confused about where my future is going to go. Even you can ask all my buddies. Like, I changed my major already this year. I had no idea what I wanted to do going into college. And there's just one day in particular that I got down on my hands and knees in my college dorm, and I just started praying, like, God, where are you leading me? Where do you want me to go? And I just heard a voice say pastor or ministry, and it hit me like a shock. I'd never pictured myself going into any sort of thing like that until this moment. And there was just one day where I made my final decision to not play baseball. I was in my public speaking class, and I was kind of zoning out all class, just thinking about this because it was weighing heavy on my heart and in my mind. And I just had the words coming to my mind, like, let it go. Just let it go. It's time to move on. And that's where I made my decision. Later that day, I texted my parents like, hey, baseball is over. I'm hanging up the cleats. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of peace about my decision. So I kind of knew that's kind of where God's guiding me. So he answered my prayers in that sense.
Was it scary? Did you have people like telling you like this is stupid? Like why are you doing this?
Absolutely. There was some coaches that were in the program that had very high reputations that said they liked my game a lot, that I had real potential. And when I would think about that, it was kind of like, okay, maybe I'm thinking about this all wrong. And I started to question kind of what I felt God was leading me to. And that made it really difficult to be like, hey, I have these professional scouts, in a sense, retired scouts. They're telling me I have real potential, that I could go far in this game. And I just didn't know what to think about it. I reached out to people like, hey, this is what somebody just said, but I don't know how to take this. Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I thinking that God's leading me this way? But in reality, I'm just thinking that I'm trying to take control. But I think it was just kind of a blockade that was trying to get me off of maybe God's path for me, that was trying to steer me back into my old ways. Like, hey, you're this legit dude. Like, you're cool because you play sports. And it's like, no, like that's my old self speaking, and not who God is trying to turn me into. So
Yeah, it's interesting because it's really tough sometimes to like really know, like, am I is this me talking, or is this, the Lord talking? Like, what am I supposed to do? What am I called to do? And it can be scary to step out in faith. I just automatically think about Noah, and the Bible story, Noah's Ark, and it's like, dude was building an ark in the desert, like,
yep.
and it's like people are ridiculing him, but that rain came,
Yep.
and it's like, who's laughing now?
Yeah.
Nobody's laughing because it's super sad, but just having that ability, and I think it's something you can grow. We talk about, that's the cool thing I think about sports and Christianity, is I think that they can relate a lot. You have to put the work in. If you don't work on yourself, and you don't practice, Christian living, then it's going to be hard to hear God.
Yeah, you can't expect results.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to know and to do the right things. It's going to be, you're going to, have that feeling of like, man, I really wish that I would just not do that. I wish I would do this instead. I wish I would act this way. But that comes from growing. That's growing. That comes from constantly failing and constantly getting back in the saddle and going, oh man, I screwed up, but I think I got an idea of how I can do this better. And so I think that the more you do that, the more you put yourself in a position where it's like, man, is this the Lord speaking? Is it not? Like, what am I supposed to do? It's one of those things where I feel like if you genuinely believe that the Lord is leading you somewhere and you're wrong, He's going to correct you.
Yep.
Like, He's going to gently correct you and say, hey, I'm not taking you that way.
Absolutely.
Right? This is the way I have for you.
Yep.
And so that's kind of how I've always encouraged people making decisions, and is if the Lord's in it and you think you're hearing something and you're actually not, then pivoting away from that, and the Lord's going to correct you. He's going to bring you back onto the path.
Absolutely.
And I don't know who those coaches are, but it kind of also reminds me of like the whole idea of the Lord has what He's trying to do and the world has what they're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And that can be, the world is always better sounding, right? In a way, right? It always sounds more fun, maybe. Mm-hmm. Like playing baseball and going far and making money in that sounds like it's more fun than, getting into ministry.
Yep.
But, what's that reward going to be like long term?
Yep.
The reward you have from serving the Lord is going to be far greater than anything that you could possibly have from the world. So that's kind of a cool dichotomy of that decision that you had to make. Is you had, on one hand, you had what you were feeling that the Lord was telling you, and then you had what the world was telling you, and that's a tough place to be. What's a key takeaway that kids can apply that to their lives? Like, when they're having to make a tough decision like this, or in school, or even with their friends, right? Sometimes, we don't have the best people around us. And as you grow in your faith and your maturity, you might realize, man, this person needs to not be in my life. But then it's like, especially in a small town, it's like you can become the bad guy real quick, So in decisions and everything like that, what would you say is a key takeaway for the kids that they can take this and apply this principle to their lives?
Yeah, so just kind of right off the bat, sometimes when you're kind of in a dilemma, you don't know which way to go, there's not a right and a wrong answer. Sometimes God is just waiting for you to make the decision, and that's something that you got to step into, and he's going to lead you whatever decision or whatever way you want to go.
Yeah.
And that's something that I kind of crossed my mind as well in this situation. It was like, maybe God's giving this decision to me, letting me decide this, and he's going to build off of that and lead me down that way.
Yeah.
And
because you could have still done ministry and baseball.
Yep. Yep.
Some of the and you mentioned it, but the fact that that one guy he went to church because someone kept nagging him, come to church, come to church, come to church. You could have done that with your baseball team, right? Hey, come to FCA, come to church, come to church. It's something we encourage the kids to do. Like, you never know when that one time that you invite that friend that they're going to go, okay, and that could change their life right then and there.
All about planting seeds.
Yeah.
Like, plant the seeds, and God will be able to grow them. And that's something that I've really kind of changed my mindset about. So I feel like so many people, especially when they're younger in their Christian kind of walk, they're like, I'm not going to make a difference. What can I do to change this person's life? What can I say to lead them to Christ? It's like you're giving yourself too much credit, man. Like, God's the one that's moving through you into them. And it's like, it could just be one thing that you just say that leaves them at the end of the day like, that like sparked a question in my mind, or how come you said this? Which leads to conversation about the whole, like, it could lead to a conversation about Christ. It could lead them to being like, hey, can I tag along with you to church today?
Yeah.
It's just little things that really do make a difference that people don't understand. I didn't understand that either until I started to put myself out there and would try to get the baseball team to go to our Bible studies, to even leading my own Bible study in that baseball kind of team atmosphere. Like, every person can make a difference. You don't have to be some super influential person, like just like the story that I was talking about that you brought up. It was just his buddy that just left the invitation, an open invitation for him to join him, and it changed his life forever. So I would encourage whoever thinks they don't have a voice or they don't think that they can move and bring people to Christ. It's like, step down off your pedestal. Like, God's in control.
It's not about you.
Exactly. You give yourself too much credit if you think you're the one that's going to bring people to Christ. I mean, you could be the one that bring people to Christ, but it's God moving through you and not yourself. So
Yeah, I think we definitely give ourselves way too much credit all the time, especially in sports too.
Yep. I was watching this movie, The Jesus Revolution, and the new pastor, Lenny something. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah. So I haven't watched it, but Calvary Chapel Bible College, Chuck started that. Chuck Smith started that, and so that's one of like our books that we have to read. Is all like, it's a required book. We have to listen to, at the Bible College, you have to listen to Chuck teach the entire Bible, low and slow. That's how Chuck teaches. It's just like this. But I learned a trick. If you listen on the podcast app, then you can
2 times
fast forward. No, you have to do like 4 times for Chuck. You can see those so slow.
But,
I
was that kind of, when I was watching that movie, there was a scene where Chuck, he was backstage with his wife, and he was like, I can't move the people like Lenny did, or whatever his name was. I can't remember his name.
I know it, but it's not in my brain.
Same. Whatever his name is, he's like, I can't do it as good as him. I can't move people like that. And the wife just said these words. She just said, you're giving yourself too much credit, man. Like, you're not the one that's convincing these people to do something or not to do it. Like, God's in you. It's the Holy Spirit that's leading you. Like, if you think you can't do it as good as somebody else, then you're telling God he can't do it. And it's just, Gotta step aside from what you think you're in control of, what you're really not. So
Yeah, and in that whole story is that he actually led, not Chuck, but the other guy led, um, because Chuck was faithful to let him in his church, because if you don't know, the whole backstory of that is they're all a bunch of hippies, and for you listeners, there's a bunch of hippies, and basically all the church going folks in their suit and tie weren't about that, and the hippies were coming to Christ left and right, not wearing shoes in church, sitting on the floor like doing wild stuff. And what happened? My favorite quote from Chuck, one of them ever, was one of the people in the one of his people at church was like, they're gonna stain the carpet with their dirty feet, and Chuck's like, well, we'll rip the carpet out then. And it's one of like his most iconic, as you will, sayings. But Lonnie, it's Lonnie.
That's what it is.
I want to say Frisbee, but I don't think it's Frisbee.
I think it is.
It might be. I don't know.
I
should know this. I went to school there. Like, this is like, all my friends from the Bible college are like, you idiot. But Lonnie, anyway, Chuck brings this guy Lonnie to Christ. Well, Lonnie actually was the one who ministered to Greg Laurie and brought Greg Laurie to Christ. And we should rephrase this, but brought Christ to Greg Laurie. Yep. That's really the way of looking at it. Lonnie was like, hey, there's this guy Jesus, Greg Laurie, you need. And then now what Greg Laurie's doing is like wild. Like, he has the Harvest Crusades. He has all that stuff that he does, and they share the gospel with millions of people, And so, yeah, like, you might influence one person, but then that person you influence goes and influences the next Greg Laurie.
It's an exponential growth.
And it's like, just because like you're not as qualified or this or that doesn't mean you shouldn't or can't. Like, you just never know that seed. You never know what that's going to grow into. Like, to think like Chuck, with what that happened and everything, it's like, who knew that, he didn't know that letting this one guy, a group of hippies, into his church, even though nobody wanted him to, right? Like, it was a very thing, and I encourage everybody. It's on Netflix or Prime Video.
I think it's on Netflix.
Probably on Prime Video too, but it's on Netflix for free. Go watch Jesus Revolution. But they, you never know the impact. Like, Chuck could never have known, right? He could never have known that this one decision of letting this one hippie and his friends, like, what that would have done for the world, what that could have done. Like, the Bible college probably wouldn't be now what it is. Like, I was able to go to that Bible college and learn and grow and be built up because he was faithful in that. And then I'm able to come back here to my hometown, and start FCA. And so the Lord is touching the lives of students at Bret Harte. And if you track it back down, like, it always goes, and you can just keep going, because someone planted a seed, because someone was faithful to act. So, it might not be something that, like, as drastic as what you went through, right? Like, the Lord might not be calling you or somebody to stop their sport and pursue this, but he's calling everybody to do something.
Yep.
He might be calling them to give up, something that is an idol to them,
like a friend,
or an addiction maybe, or a bad habit, or to go plant a seed in a friend's life.
Yep.
He's calling us all to do something. Like, the Lord doesn't want us just to sit around and do nothing.
Yep.
And so, it might not be as drastic as Erik's story, whatever you guys are going through, but, the Lord's calling you to something. And that principle that Erik spoke about today definitely applies to that, of being able to step out in faith and go, doesn't make sense really. I'm going to do it anyway and see what the Lord has for it.
Yeah, and that's something that kind of you touched on right there in your last sentence, is like, it's what the Lord wants. It's not necessarily what I want at the time. And that's something that I would always do so much, is I would try to rely on what I wanted, what my own understanding of things were, rather than like giving it to God and be like, hey, this is where I'm at. Like, you guide me and I'm going to run with it. Like, you don't understand it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back, like, I just see so many things, pivotal moments in my life that I wanted at times. Like, I wanted this, but if I would have gotten that, I could be in a completely different place at this point. I could be a completely different person, you know. um, Looking back, you just see that he was really looking out for you, and that everything kind of leads up to a point that you just didn't know, you couldn't see it at the time, that it kind of built you to a new person, kind of lets you let go of those old habits, those old things, those old friends that weren't leading you in the right direction. So and kind of you touched on it as well. I want to go on another little spiel here, is planting seeds. Like, you never know what's going to happen. All it takes is one, like, faithful person, and they can change a lot of people. And for me, it was kind of like my turning point, in a sense, is my junior year summer a few years ago. I was in a relationship with a girl that was very, very in-depth in her faith. She was a very good follower. She was a very good role model to me. And just when I first started talking to her, Jesus and God would come up all the time for her. And I was always like, wow, like, I want to be a part of that. Because for me, I was the typical, like, lukewarm Christian, I like to call it, is I would just go through the motions, like, in my faith, just like people do in sports, like we talked about earlier. I would just go through the motions. I grew up going to church. I was there because my family was there, and it wasn't really about me at that point. And when I kind of started talking to this girl, it was like, wow, that's kind of where my faith turned around. It was like, I want this for me now. I don't want it because my family wants it. I want it for me. And it just took that one girl that, I mean, it didn't, like, the relationship didn't last. We didn't get married or anything, but God puts people in your life that just for even a short period that can really change the course of your life. So, yeah.
And my encouragement as we get ready to start this new year of FCA to our kids is, like, we met with our leaders, and I kind of shared with them our vision for FCA this year, and it's just to really focus on one person. Focus on one person that you're, like, I told them, like, pick one person that you want to be here, want to get to FCA, start praying for them, you know. And because behind every hand and every person, there's a heart, you know. And so it's this idea of, how can we get to their heart? How can we get there? Just keep asking them.
And that's something, praying for other people is something that I've really tried to incorporate into my prayers all the time now. Like, before, it was always about, oh, help me do this. I want this. Please be with me for this. And I mean, that's not necessarily a wrong to do those kind of things, but recently, in the last year, I've started to pray for others. That's something that's really been put on my heart, is pray for others who aren't praying for themselves, that don't know Christ. Pray for your neighbors. Pray for your coworkers, because they don't have somebody that is leading them to Christ. And that's something that I've tried to do over the summer, and as a goal of mine, is to be the difference in somebody's lives, to be that person that can bring somebody to Christ, that haven't been shown who he is, or his love, or his grace. So that's something that I really started to incorporate, is just pray for others, even if it's just one person, like you're talking about. Like, that can be huge. If you get that one person, it's I would consider it a success.
Yeah, and I think it starts there too. Like, you have to start. The foundation of the foundation of everything we do should be prayer. You know, you want to pursue somebody, a relationship with somebody, you need to be praying, Lord, is this what I should do? You know, I have a decision coming up. Lord, is this what you want from me? And I read this morning in 1 Kings, and chapter 18, it's the story of Elisha, and when he goes up against the prophets of Baal, and it's a funny story. Everyone loves it, because he's like, all right, we're gonna put you guys to a test. Here's an altar for you guys, and an animal for a burnt sacrifice, and here's one for me. You pray to your gods, and I'll pray to my God, and then whoever's God lights the fire, then that's the real God. Then he's talking to the children of Israel who were following Baal and just being dumb. And I love it, because they're in there and they're all, like, screaming and chanting and dancing, trying to get their gods to light this fire. And Elisha starts to taunt them, and he's like, he's basically like, maybe your God's sleeping. Say it louder. And so he's kind of just messing, having some fun, and then it gets serious, and it's his turn, and it's in the evening, and he goes, all right, and they douse his fire with water, or his little altar with water, and then he doesn't start dancing, he doesn't start being loud, he doesn't go right into it. He just gets on his hands and knees and he prays and he asks the Lord, hey, bring your light this fire, and let's get your children back on you. And then fire from heaven comes down, it consumes the animal, the wood, and the stones, and then it dries up all the water on top of that. And I just was kind of thinking this morning when I was pondering that, and when I was doing a little bit of journaling on that passage, and I was like, man, like, the faith that he had, like, it was developed through prayer. Like, yeah, that moment on that mountain when he did that was awesome, but, like, he didn't get there. Like, he didn't one day just wake up and go, I'm going to challenge like, no. He was praying. He was in fellowship with the Lord through prayer, and that's kind of what got him there. And then in order to make it happen, he had to pray. He had to sit down and pray. And so, to me, I think that needs to be such a key part of, it needs to be the first thing we do. Yep. Too many people, bad thing comes, then we pray.
Yep. I love that point. That's something that I've definitely been guilty of. Is I found myself praying in times of trouble, but it's like, why aren't you praying when things go good for you? Why aren't you praying then? It's like,
yeah,
why?
It's like, you want me now.
Yeah,
cool.
Exactly. And it's almost like I found myself guilty of this, and I know a lot of people do, is they think praying is like a bargain with God. Mm-hmm. It's like, I promise I'll do this, but just give me this. Like, they think they're making a deal with God, and that's not what it's about. It's about having your time and building your personal relationship with God. Yep. And it talks about, I don't know what book it's in, but it talks about how Jesus went up. I think it's in Matthew. Jesus went up to the top of a mountain to pray to God, and he had crowds all around him, but he separated himself from the crowds to go have his individual time with God. And that time of prayer, like I said, building that relationship with God one-on-one is super important. And then you can then go preach to others around you, but it starts with your relationship with God, and that comes through prayer.
Yeah. Well, the cleaning clues here at the church, so we're gonna end this now before we have to hear vacuums and stuff. That's life for you. Church got to be clean, so that better a clean church than a dirty one.
Absolutely.
It's got to clean it so that we can get it dirty on Sunday.
Absolutely.
So real quick before you leave, one last thing. If you could recap everything we've talked about and just say, hey, if you're only going to remember one thing, what is it?
Yeah, I would say your time with the Lord is super important, like we were talking about in prayer, that your relationship with Christ shouldn't be a hobby, something you go to on Sunday and spend one day with the Lord out of your week. It's not a hobby. Your relationship with Christ needs to be who you are, what your life is. It's not just something you pick up on the weekend, like I said. You need to fully be passionate with Christ if you want to further your walk and build your relationship with him. Like we're talking about, prayer is huge, getting in your word is huge, and just living out the way Christ wants us to. And that comes with knowing Christ, which comes back to prayer and reading your word. Mm-hmm. The closer you get to Christ, the more your heart aligns with Christ. Yeah. And that really reflects in your actions. And I think that's huge for a lot of kids, and was huge for me during high school, is my actions didn't reflect my relationship with Christ. I was living my worldly life. And once I got to college and was surrounded by those good people that really were like, hey, this is the way, that really my heart started to align with what God wants for my life. So I would encourage you guys to really try to seek after God and spend time with him, so that your heart can align with what he wants for you in your life.
Well, awesome. Speaking of prayer, and then we'll end on this, how can the kids, the FCA, the people of Bret Harte be praying for you? What do you have coming up on down the pipeline? I know you're going to college next week, going back for year 2. What What can they be praying for you? Where can they find you on social media if you're on it? You know.
Yeah, so I'm not on social media, not anymore. So
Oh,
no social media, unfortunately.
No problem with that.
Yeah, that was letting go of one of my things that I needed to get rid of. But definitely the aspect of going through college and remaining faithful, remaining in my faith, and not letting the outside things kind of tempt me or try to steer me a certain direction, that I'll be able to move people and be a light to people that don't know the Lord, that don't, have people around them that really care about them, to show them God's love. So just pray that I can be that light for people.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. And have fun at college. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right.